going to read today a little bit from this 5th canto because it's so inspirational, but we can do today's verse as well. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya. Narayanam Namaskritya. Naram Chaiva Narottamam. Naram Chaiva Narottamam. Devam Saraswatim Vyasam. Devam Saraswatim Vyasam. Tato Jayamadiraye. Tato Jayamadiraye. Nasta Prayashu Bhadreshu. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Bhagavati Uttama Shloke. Bhagavati Uttama Shloke. Bhaktir Bhagavati Naistiki. Bhaktir Bhagavati Naistiki. Reading from Shrimadbhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 6, Text 14, 15. 15. Tasmin. Nirmanuje. Ranye. Tasmin nirmanuje Ranye. Pippalopasta. Ashrita. Pippalopasta Ashrita. Atmanatmanam. Atmastam. Atmanatmanam Atmastam. Yata. Shrutam. Achintayam. Yata Shrutam Achintayam. Tasmin Nirmanujir Anye. Pippalopasta Ashrita. Atmanatmanam Atmastam. Yata Shrutam Achintayam. Tasmin Nirmanujir Ranye. Pippalopasta Ashrita. Atmanatmana Atmastam. Yata Shrutam Achintayam. Tasmin Nirmanujir Anye. Pippalopasta Ashrita. Atmanatmanam Atmastam. Yata Shrutam Achintayam. Tasmin Nirmanujir Anye. Pippalopasta Ashrita. Atmanatmanam Atmastam. Yata Shrutam Achintayam. Anyone else? Tasmin. In that. Nirmanuje. Without human habitation. Aranye. In the forest. Pippala. Banyan tree. Upaste. Sitting under it. Ashrita. Taking shelter of. Atmana. By intelligence. Atmanam. The super soul. Atmastam, situated within myself. Yatta Shrotam, as I had heard it from the liberated souls. Achintayam, thought over. Tasmin nirmanajir anye pipalopasta asrita atmanam mastam yata shrutam achintayam. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace of Acharnadavinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. After that, under the shadow of a banyan tree, in an uninhabited forest, I began to meditate upon the Supersoul situated within, using my intelligence as I had learned from liberated souls. Please repeat. After that, under the shadow of a banyan tree, in an uninhabited forest, I began to meditate upon the Supersoul, situated within, using my intelligence, as I had learned from liberated souls. After that, under the shadow of a banyan tree in an uninhabited forest, I began to meditate upon the Supersoul situated within, using my intelligence as I had learned from liberated souls. Purport by His Divine Grace of Acharnadavinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. One should not meditate according to one's personal whims. One should know perfectly well from the authoritative sources of Scripture, through the transparent medium of a bona fide spiritual master, and by the proper use of one's trained intelligence for meditating upon the Supersoul dwelling within every living being. This consciousness is firmly developed by a devotee who has rendered loving service unto the Lord by carrying out the orders of the spiritual master. Sri Naradji contacted bona fide spiritual masters, served them sincerely, and got enlightenment rightly. Thus, he began to meditate. So, Narad Muni is revealing some of his initial stages of development with pure bhakti. Then here in Canto 5, Chapter 17, Text 11, one should render transcendental loving service to the Supreme Lord Krishna favorably and without desire for material profit or gain through fruitive activities or philosophical speculation. So that includes, we were talking about holding a job, that includes going out and making money off giving your darshan. That is called pure devotional service. Those who fully engage in devotional service to Krishna just to please Him are not interested in the three divisions of heavenly places, namely Divya Svarga, Bhoma Svarga, and Bila Svarga. So these Svargas are going to be described. So what we will learn about from the description of these, this is what is contained within this material universe. And as I was describing an ocean of honey, which just simply taking a taste of, in these 8 varshas, or tracts of land, human beings live 10,000 years according to earthly calculations. All the inhabitants are almost like demigods. They have bodily strength of 10,000 elephants. Indeed, their bodies are as sturdy as thunderbolts. The youthful duration of their lives is very pleasing, and both men and women enjoy sexual union with great pleasure for a long time. After years of sensual pleasure, when a balance of 1 year of life remains, the wife conceives a child. Thus, the standard of pleasure for the residents of these heavenly regions is exactly like that of the human beings who lived during Treta Yuga. And in that time, they lived to be 10,000 years. But these inhabitants who are living in this particular place are living for 10,000 years. Oh, I said 10,000 years. No, they live for 1,000 years. Is it? Live 10,000 years, or 10,000 years, just as though they were in Treta Yuga. In each of those tracts of land, there are many gardens filled with flowers and fruits, according to the season, and there are beautifully decorated hermitages as well. Between the great mountains demarcating the borders of those lands lie enormous lakes of clear water filled with newly grown lotus flowers. I don't know how new they'd be now. This was 5,000. I'm kidding, of course. Aquatic birds such as swans, ducks, water chickens, and cranes become greatly excited by the fragrance of lotus flowers, and the charming sound of bumblebees fills the air. The inhabitants of those lands are important leaders among the demigods. Always attended by their respective servants, they enjoy life in gardens alongside the lakes. In this pleasing situation, the wives of the demigods smile playfully at their husbands and look upon them with lusty desires. All the demigods and their wives are constantly supplied with sandalwood pulp and flower garlands by their servants. In this way, all the residents of the 8 heavenly Varshas enjoy, attracted by the activities of the opposite sex. To show mercy to his devotees in each of these 9 tracts of land, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, known as Narayan, expands himself in his quadruple principles of Vasudev, Shankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. In this way, he remains near his devotees who accept their service. Text 15. Sukadev Goswami said, in the tract of land known as Yavartivarsh, the only male person is Lord Shiva, the most powerful demigod. Goddess Durga, the wife of Lord Shiva, does not like any man to enter that land. If any foolish man dares to do so, she immediately turns him into a woman. I shall explain this later in the 9th canto. In Yavartavarsh, Lord Shiva is always encircled by 10 billion maidservants of Goddess Durga who minister to him. The quadruple expansion of the Supreme Lord is composed of Vasudeva, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, and Shankarshan. Shankarshan, the 4th expansion, is certainly transcendental, but because his activities of destruction in the material world are in the mode of goodness, he is known as Tamasi, the Lord's form in the mode of ignorance. Lord Shiva knows that Shankarshan is the original cause of his own existence, and thus he always meditates upon him in trance by chanting the following mantra. I'm not going to go through that. No, there was another place where they were talking about the honey. Okay. Anyways, I described that. Oh, it's back here. That's where I hadn't gone that far enough. That's the problem. Yeah, here it is. The amount on On top of Mount Meru, the Ganges divides into 4 branches, each of which gushes in different directions, east, west, north, and south. These branches, known by the names Sita, Alakananda, Chakshu, and Bhadra, flow down to the ocean. The branch of the Ganges known as the Sita flows through Brahmapuri atop Mount Meru. From there, it runs down to the nearby peaks of the Kesharchal Mountains, which stand almost as high as Mount Meru itself. These mountains are like a bunch of filaments around Mount Meru. From the Kesharchala Mountains, the Ganges falls to the peak of Gandhamadhan Mountain and then flows into the land of Bhadrashvavarsh. Finally, it reaches the ocean of salt water in the west. This is describing how Ganges gets to the earth.
Which chapter?
Okay, this is the same chapter, chapter 5, Canto 5, chapter 17. And I was just reading from text 6. But I wanted to read that part. Okay. Similarly, the branch of Ganges known as Alakananda flows from the southern side of Brahmapuri, Brahmasadana. Passing over the tops of mountains in various lands, it falls down with fierce force upon the peaks of the mountains. Himakuta and Himakuta. After inundating the tops of these mountains, the Ganges falls down onto the tract of land known as Bharatvarsh, which she also inundates. That's the land of India, I believe. Then the Ganges flows into the ocean of salt water in the south. Persons who come to bathe in this river are fortunate. It is not very difficult for them to achieve with every step. Jai every step the results of performing great sacrifices like the Rajasuya and the Ashwamedha Yajnas. Many other rivers, both big and small, flow from the top of Mount Meru. These rivers are like daughters of the mountain, and they flow to the various tracts of land in hundreds of branches. Among the 9 varshas, the tract of land known as Bharatvarsh is understood to be the field of fruitive activities. Learned scholars and saintly persons declare the other 8 varshas to be meant for very highly elevated, pious persons. After returning from the heavenly planets, they enjoy the remaining results of their pious activities in these 8 earthly varshas. In these 8 varshas, or tracts of land, human beings live 10,000 years. Okay, and I had already read that. So this is still contained within this universe. So if such transcendental experiences that these living entities are having contained, we can only, in our mind's eye, imagine what kind of pleasant environmental circumstances there are in the Vaikuntha realm, where there is no death, no old age, no disease. These things don't grow old. They stay eternally youthful. And so the experience of those inhabitants, that land that was promised to the Israelites when they walked around in the forest for 40 years. Not the forest, the desert. Forest would have been a blessed place to go into. They walked in the forest for 40 years so that that generation of people could die off. The scriptures re-roll that, which gives us an idea of the mentality of the people. They had just been freed from slavery, but they got put into slavery because of their disobedience from God. But here, their offspring were being promised a promised land that was flowing with milk and honey. Remember that, the description of that? Where do we see steaks and pigs and hogs and cats and rats being slaughtered for food? There was nothing like that in their mind being put into their minds by Moses. He was revealing to them, which God, it is credited, was giving him to give them as a vision to see for the future, to change the mentality of their minds, to look forward to those things that would satisfy them in a different way than they had been driven to believe was the only way human bodies could be satisfied. Much like presently in the American society, 50, 60, 70 years ago, vegetarianism for the most part in America was not even thought of as a functioning way of life. They thought you die if you don't eat meat, you're going to die, it'll just take a few years, you know, which is crazy mentality. And yet it was the whole thought process of practically everyone in the society. I mean, being alive in those 50, 60, 70 years ago, that was the general thought. And now, having come, well, full turn now, maybe 180 degrees around, saying, yeah, actually, the things we had been eating for all those years back were detrimental to our well-being and to our health. And only seeing that from the external consequences, what to speak then, what the soul has to go through for the taking of all these lives unnecessarily for the continuance of his existence, which is simply just being a vegetarian. But that doesn't account for the fact that even though we may be vegetarians, as devotees we're not really vegetarian. We are prashadatarians. Because you can be a vegetarian, but if you don't offer the food to Krishna, the reaction that automatically comes because of the stopping of the cycle of the process, each and every soul that the human being is taking the life of. Rice has a soul, beans have souls, all these dolls, eggplants just filled with seeds, every seed has a soul in it. And in every meal that a human being is taking part in, without giving that to the Supreme, he becomes responsible for that. The loss of the lives, the loss of the soul's progress. Now, from one perspective, you could say, okay, he is benefiting the human being, so the soul that is doing that as a service to the human beings, he may get some benefit from that. But the human being just taking what they're doing. We think of it as ours. If I put the seed in the soil, even though I don't own the soil even, people, human beings, naturally think of it as theirs. And this ownership is what gives us responsibility of what we do with it. So once it becomes mine, in my hands, then whatever I take to do to that thing becomes put upon my chart of all the things I've done in this world to continue my existence here. And it creates the mentality we are owed. Everything this world has is ours to use for our pleasure and to do whatever we want with it. And that is an extension of the false ego. We wonder why we have so many seemingly ritualistic ways of conducting ourselves. We enter the temple immediately bowing down. When you see even the temple from afar, we're advised to bow down. Come to a sacred river, we bow down. The mentality of that, putting ourselves lower than the straw in the street, immediately puts us in the state of mind necessary for Krishna to be able to give to our consciousness that flowing knowledge and that communication that we need as souls. It is the soul that is believing it's required to have external substances to continue its existence. And that's why in the physical body we're forced to commit karmic reactions. It's the way the body is made. And the material world is made in such a way to enable one to just continue in that cycle. Even the Ishopanishad is saying one can continue in that service forever. You can stay in the material world as long as we want. Krishna is not forcing us. But what we have to be brought to the knowledge of, because this is most people's endeavor. They wish they could live here forever, isn't it? Come to the end of life, and boy, I wish I could keep on going. I don't want to die. But it is the lack of knowledge of what God has in store for the living entities who do take part in his energy. Because that which we are seeing here in this mortal world is barely a flicker, as almost compared, the lightness of it is compared to a shadow. And so even what we think to be the greatest amounts of energy and that which we witness with these mortal eyes are very small sparks of Krishna's energy. And so we have to keep that in mind as we continue through our service and through our life to realize that we've been given a great privilege now to be able to know where we are, where we stand in relationship with the universe, and how fallen a state we are in to have left the presence of those who never left Krishna's presence. And then by that realization, then we can know we have a long way to go to develop that pure state of consciousness where we will feel perfectly comfortable in their association. Because these exalted souls, being described even holding positions in this universe, are holding positions of such great authority. We think a high position of authority in this world is the president, the mayor, the governor, and these positions. But those positions of demigods in the planets of the higher planetary systems that totally affect, without their knowing it, all the lives of the living entities that are taking part in activities that contribute to the benefit of the demigods, and thereby bringing them to the place where ultimately, if they're brought to a place of realization, they can gain heaven. But most people we see in this society who are themselves believing such a place exists because they do not have the completeness of knowledge necessary to bring them to the lotus feet of the Supreme Person. They are lacking what is needed, what they are needing to bring them to those heavenly realms. And engaging in sinful activities on a regular, daily basis. And they will admittedly say all human beings are subject to this kind of a life. It is believed by most followers of Christianity that we are all subject to sin without any means out. We're sinful creatures day by day by day. And that's the reason we pray to God to forgive us every day on a regular basis. Which we also hold the same, we commit offenses without knowing as well. In the Sanskrit literature, sin means missing the mark. And so many of us were aiming directly at the same target, but not everybody's arrow is reaching the same bullseye. And so Krishna consciousness gives us the means of focusing in on that. In Krishna's heart of hearts, that purest of love that we want to be able to know God has for us and that God has for every form of life that there is. So that by engaging in that energy, we will experience that to the fullest extent that we're able to in this human form. But that will give us the impetus to continue on the path and to automatically bring us into that place with Krishna in darshan. Did you get a chance to go to Sadhu Sangha? before?
No.
No. And you've been here, right? So that would have been a wonderful thing to know, and I'm sure there are tapes made. In the congregation of that size with devotees, you get an experience so much realization being shared with one another. It really is uplifting. It really makes you get a taste for what it must be like in the spiritual world. We're talking there in that place where Lord Shiva is now. In this material world, his wife has 2 billion maidservants. That's just beyond our capacity to realize what that means. And so they are functioning under a completely different means of performance service than what we are familiar with doing. But as well, it reveals to us those positions that are available as we make progress. But that which we are being given the opportunity to make progress to is even beyond any position in upper or lower places in this universe entirely, beyond Brahmaloka. And those islands that one has to attain to in order to reach Brahmaloka is just beyond our ability to even comprehend how we would get crossing these rivers. And so then what to speak of breaking through the barriers of the universe that Krishna's going to carry us through. But we will go through that in a different form altogether, because the soul will then manifest in its original form. When Krishna comes to take the soul, rather than the Yamadutas coming to pull the soul out. When you're going to be approached by Krishna, it will be with great anticipation. So devotee will anticipate seeing Krishna while he's leaving his body, whereas someone who has not known anything about Krishna whatsoever, they're going to be forced out of their body. If you read 5th canto about Ajamil, that's 6th canto, I think that is 6th canto. And the life story of Ajamil gives us, have you read the story of Ajamil? Okay. Ajamil functions as a Brahmin for the majority of his youthful years, all the way up till being, mid-life, and then falls in love with a prostitute. So he gives over everything he has gained in devotional service. He spends. Spiritual advancement goes down the drain, basically. And he ends up giving his whole power, force, everything, having children with a woman who is a prostitute. And so then he is approached by the Yamadutas, whose bodily forms, just to look upon, are fearsome. We have descriptions of legendary creatures that loom in the dark in the forests of the wilds, right? But these beings, if you can imagine now, they're able to pull the soul out of the body. No matter how much force the living soul, which has in itself, its stature is greater than billions of suns. And yet these living servants of Yamaraj are able to pull the soul out of the body, dragging them to the destination of punishment. And there are various planets in the universe made specifically for suffering. By the will of the living entity choosing the ways to cause suffering for other living entities, automatically brings that soul the reaction of the suffering they have brought upon other living entities 7 times. 7 times. Which is actually merciful, because when you think about it, if you plant a seed, you get an unlimited amount of seeds in return, don't you? One plant, one eggplant, produces close to 1,000 seeds, maybe. And then what to speak, then you start planting those seeds, so you've got an unlimited supply, which is evidence of the fact that contained within every seed is an eternal force. Otherwise, how would it be able to produce eternal substance? There's an eternity there. People don't analyze or reason like this. But how are you going to get something out of something that it doesn't have? You get a bucket full of water. You're going to pull gold out of it now? You only pull the water that's in there. If the bucket's 2 gallons full, you get 2 gallons of water out of the bucket. Is that right? Take a seed. Unlimited energy coming out of that seed. That's Krishna. Because when you plant that seed, it produces itself 7 times, 10 times, 20 times, millions of times from one seed. The same energy promoting its own replication is the same energy required to replicate that over and over again, unlimitedly, eternal. So this just by analyzing using the senses of the physical body, one can come to these same conclusions about there being some kind of an eternal force that's driving everything. How long has this sun been burning? I mean, just think about analyzing just creation itself by that means. But when we can see such a perfect way of everything returning to its original form, the water comes down, breaks down the rocks, the constant watering brings those minerals down to a place where the plants now are put in a place to be able to absorb those minerals into its body in a way to give other living entities the ability to absorb those minerals into its body, and then it passes out, turns back into the same substance it was in the beginning. And this endless cycle is like that in the world. We think there is such a thing as waste. But Krishna, the maintainer, this is why maintenance is in the mode of goodness. It keeps things flowing, right? Once we clog things up, dirty bacteria, it's the same way the body works. When it gets clogged up, it doesn't work anymore. So, need air. The breath of God is that breath of life that we are. And that energy that we engage in as that breath of life will continue past this body's use. So the material energy we're trying to mix with, we're not mixing with, but we're causing reactions in it that we have to go through unless we're not creating those waves or those reactions. The only way there's ripples in the water is if something gets thrown in the water. So if we're not in the water, we're not in the material energy, we're not creating ripples to cause karmic reactions. As long as we're in Krishna consciousness, performing seva, then you're free from sinful activities. Your actions are what cause sin, right? And reactions to sin. But if those actions are always in that spiritual energy of Krishna, the reaction will be from Krishna with love. That's the only thing he has to give us. Krishna has love to give. The form he takes as Yamaraj is a different form, performing a different function. Just like the form he takes at the bottom of this universe, a different form, it doesn't mean he's a different person. He has the ability to expand himself unlimitedly. Krishna is Satchidananda, Vigraha, unlimited. But we, Satchidananda, same substance, but limitedly. And he's unlimited. And he's doing all this so that we can taste the unlimited nature of his own being, of his own presence. And as we progress as well, everything in our mind that we now conceive of as great or sacred or holy is only going to increase and get better and better and better. So as these principles are followed by Krishna, our senses, spiritual senses, will become more and more real to us. And the experience we have on a regular basis that is so satisfying that we will not want anything else. And in that experience, we would become totally centered. It's like a volcano eruption. You can't be close enough to it without getting affected by it. You can't get far away from it without still being affected by it. So Krishna's love is like that. And if every living entity is experiencing that love or blossoming, then it will transform the environment. Because consciousness is making the environment also. Consciousness is what it was that designed this building. Every building we see being made, every occupational duty being performed, all by consciousness of the living entities who have chosen to make the decisions they think is necessary to continue their existence only, or to increase their pleasure only. And none of it actually related directly to Krishna, all remotely removed. Krishna benefits by all of it. He says even the disobedient are serving him without knowing it. But they won't get benefit by it because it won't do them any good. We have a guest coming here regularly, a devotee that's been here for many years. And he has a child that yells and screams at the top. You've heard him, right? Screams at the top of their lungs. You know why they're doing that? Because they're rewarded every time they do that. In order to satisfy the child, the parent rewards the activity by giving them a sweet or comforting them. And this all works in the child's psychology. Oh, when I yell, this is how they treat me. And so this is the same way the soul does with Krishna. We get away with as much as we can. And Krishna does that too. He steals as a child as much as he can get away with without his mother. His mother has to overcome the cuteness in order to discipline him because he's so attractive. And the way he performs these things, knowingly, you have to remember, he's God when he does these things. So he does it provokingly, how can we say, purposefully, to bring out of his mother those relationships with her that he wants to reveal to the rest of the world. Various aspects of his own philosophy of Krishna consciousness. When he eats dirt, and then his mother explains to him. So he puts himself in the position of a child so that his mother's profound understanding that she has come to reach this stage of development of relationship can reveal to the world who will read these pastimes about the difference between Mayavadi philosophy and personal philosophy with Krishna. And she reveals that to her son as a child, like 4 or 5 years old, eating dirt. Now, you go out here in the neighborhood, if their child's eating dirt, what's going to happen? Probably get spanked, might, go to bed, might not eat breakfast, be trained not to do that again. So in a sense, this parenting works on several different levels. There's a saying, carry a heavy stick. Speak softly, but carry a heavy stick. The threat is there to know, you better pay attention and better listen, or the stick is there. But a wise servant or a wise giver of knowledge doesn't have to use the stick if he speaks wisely. The child, the same way. I got a stick once in my life. My mother gave me a spanking so bad. I only needed it once. It changed me for the rest of my life. And so it can be like that too in Krishna consciousness. Once we come to the point where we realize that Krishna is the supreme, then it only makes that one decision that we make in our minds. Okay, Krishna, I'm yours. Do with me what you want. Once we come to that point, then Krishna takes over, and we don't have to start making our own minds up about things. Just let Krishna do it. Krishna will give you you come in contact with people, you will have a certain sensitivity about them, whether you want to associate with them or not, whether you want to give them knowledge or not, whether you want to be a friend with them or not. Super soul, he knows the inside, he knows that person's dreams they had yesterday, he knows the person's parents' name, he knows the friends they're with, he knows everything about everybody you're going to come in contact with, and can fill your knowledge of the means to be able to communicate with them in such a way that they can look to Krishna and say, yeah, you're right, I want to follow him. Because Krishna, it just makes the most amount of sense when you do come to realize who Krishna is and what he's doing for all living entities. You can't help but want to say, wow, yeah, he's actually doing what I think, God should do, and more so. And more so. And Christianity, and most other paths I've seen, it seems like there's a question as to whether it's fully justifiable for there to be an eternal heaven and an eternal hell, one life to make the decision, irregardless of where you've been born, and both decisions are for what? For eternity. And no removal out of either one. You go in there and you're not going to get out. So it leaves the practitioner with questions unanswered. Now, with the knowledge that super soul is there, for people who do pursue, all these paths are there for the set of circumstances they're in, and that they've been brought to that stage to bring them to the next step. But like Dasrat told me, when we used to go out and preach, whenever the Christians become, they want to form a prayer circle. So I would join in with them, holding hands with the Christians, we pray to the Lord. And so Dasrat grabbed my hand, pull me out of the circle. What are you doing? These people don't know who we're praying to. So at a very young stage, we think we're all praying to the same God. But they're not. And they don't know it. Now, they acknowledge there is super soul, which is the same super soul that we are acknowledging exists. But what guides their understanding of what super soul would prompt them to do is restricted by their knowledge of who God is, what God wants, what God's doing, and all these things. So the recompense of karma is not fully understood. And without it being fully understood, even their pious activities become detrimental to their spiritual advancement, because they don't know they're abetting people, they're aiding people in their sinful acts. And so this is a principle that's to a great extent not understood in Christianity. Some preachers understand that, but it is looked upon as an act of charity, an act of kindness, to give someone support, to give them some money, to give them this thing or that thing. Our philosophy is we give them prasadam. So we don't even give people food, because that food is going to give them more attachment to the material world and keep them bound up by the karma they're going to create by cooking that for themselves. If they don't know about prasadam, they don't know about how to offer to Krishna, then they are more involving themselves in their karmic reactions, even when we give them food that hasn't been offered. So that's why we only distribute foods that have been offered to Krishna. So if somebody takes out of, see all these foods that people offer, there's many ways that this is affected if somebody steals that food. When that food is going to be offered, first of all, the person who's offering it is going to get benefited because they have made that as an offering to Krishna. The offering itself, now the soul that is the form of life that produced that is also going to get benefit, right? And that benefit will be like the difference we're talking about between heaven and hell. That's actually there for something being offered to Krishna, whether it will be or not be, because the chances of it getting after it's thrown in the garbage, 0. No chance. And if you give it to somebody and they eat it for their own, it's worse than 0. Get that? Because they're actually going to accumulate more karma from it, which when they take it in the form of prasadam, relieves them of the karma. See the difference? And so what if someone steals that? That was going to end the material consciousness of the eggplant, or the watermelon, or whatever it was. It was going to end that chain of replication of birth and death, old age and disease, for the seed, the soul that watermelon's body came from, that was going on the altar. Now the soul took it away from being able to have that done. What kind of a sin is that? It's no longer stealing for food to satisfy one's stomach. Do you see that? It's worse than death. It's worse than death for the watermelon, because the watermelon had the chance to become liberated and was deprived of that. Think about that. See the difference between, you go out there to Kroger's and steal, you won't get the same reaction, because none of that food is being used for the most part. We do shop at Kroger's, but what little percentage gets used to Krishna is, I could say, for the most part, you go over there and you're stealing from Kroger's. You're not stealing from a devotee who's going to offer that food to Krishna. So, in this same way, relatively, what somebody does to you to restrict you from performing your service or to make it more difficult for you to perform, they're doing that directly to Krishna. When it is his energy now that you are working towards, as long as they are trying to stop you, that is what is determined as demon. Working against the laws of God, working against the energy of God. That is what is the definition of demon, right? We don't like to think of people like that. It's not a way to preach to them, to become friends with them. But we're dealing with demonic mentalities. Pure souls, but demonic mentality, which contaminates it from being able to realize its pure state. So as long as a pure soul is in a state of consciousness that clouds itself from knowing what it is, it's no longer pure soul. It's covered. It's dormant, idle, might as well be dead. The dead who lie dormant are now creating no more karma. So who's in a better place? The people who are dead, not creating karma, or someone out there working full force trying to create karma, which they don't know they're doing. It's better to sit there doing nothing than to be causing more karma. See, they would criticize us for chanting because they think we're doing nothing. But even if we were doing nothing, it would be better than creating for ourselves more suffering by engaging in karma. So on one hand, there's different ways of looking at work, which Krishna gives us the ability to see from the Bhagavad Gita. If we're not working for Krishna, we're working for Kali. We're working for the sense of the body. We're becoming slaves to our body. We're working for the opposite energy. So that's why it's so important for us to concentrate and realize, what is my purpose in Krishna consciousness? And how am I going to use the energy of this body to engage in that eternal service? Somehow we've got to find that eternal place with Krishna that we belong in. Krishna called you here to return you to that eternal place you belong in. And it's all going to be straightened out by the way we think, by the consciousness we develop in our attitudes towards the activities we perform now and the relationships we develop now and the, how can we say, the faithfulness we prove to Krishna that we take to heart what he is giving us as wholeheartedly as we can, to reveal to him how much we appreciate what he's doing for us. That's what devotional service is too. It's an expression of the soul to Krishna. Thank you, Krishna, for setting me free. I want to do everything now to show you my appreciation. And so that means rising early, taking only prasad, purifying the senses. It means getting to experience life the way it was meant to be experienced, with full experience of happiness and full satisfaction that comes from knowing you're doing what God wants you to do, that will provide for you a satisfaction that nothing else in this world can provide. But go and try. If you think not, just go and try some other engagement. There is nothing else. I guarantee you, I can say. Krishna will reveal to you everything you want to know, everything you need to know. And we can be so happy that he was willing to do that. So, any comments, any questions, any realizations you might like to share? The world is listening. We are very fortunate. We are certainly very fortunate. The most fortunate souls to have this knowledge. Yeah. Jai. Grant Shrimadbhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.